Please keep in mind 2 points when we listen to the teaching. First, the Dharma is rare and precious and very hard to encounter even in millions of kalpas. Now that we are fortunate enough to encounter it in this life, we should strive to grasp the Tathagata's true meaning with the blessings of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Second, we attend this class not for our own benefit in this life or future lives, but for the purpose of liberating boundless sentient beings so that they can be freed from the samsara of life and death and attain the ocean-like great qualities mentioned in the Dharma. This is the essence of bodhicitta, which should be kept in mind in every class. Generally speaking, a practitioner with a higher capacity generates bodhicitta when heading to the Dharma hall for listening to the teaching. A practitioner with a middling capacity generates bodhicitta when hearing the announcement sound of a conch shell or a drum. A practitioner with average capacity generates bodhicitta only when being reminded by the Dharma teacher at the beginning of the teaching. Whichever kind of practitioner you are, you should constantly practice arousing bodhicitta, and eventually it will definitely arise. After generating bodhicitta, we should start to meditate on the difficulty of finding the freedoms and advantages and carefully examine whether we are endowed with the 18 freedoms and advantages. If we have them all, we should be joyful. If not, we should strive to have them all by all means. Now that we have the precious human life and the opportunity to practice Dharma, then living in this world renders great and significant meaning. As said in Bhavavika's Essence of the Middle Way, relying on the luminous Dharma, we know the 18 freedoms and advantages. Only through the true practice of the Dharma does human life become truly meaningful. Of all the beings in the 6 realms, only very few obtain a human form. Among all those who are reborn as humans, very few of them have the opportunity to practice the Dharma. Among all Dharma practitioners, very few of them have the 18 freedoms and advantages. Therefore, it is extremely difficult to find the freedoms and advantages for the Dharma. To avoid spending our precious human life in vain, you must practice ngondro well. Otherwise, it will be very difficult to proceed to other practices. Therefore, please don't hasten to higher teachings. Make sure you establish a solid foundation through ngondro practice. Of course, such a foundation cannot be established overnight. It requires a long-term sustained practice. When I was a beginner, I heard my gurus emphasizing the importance of ngondro, but I didn't have an in-depth understanding of it. As I advanced in my Dharma study and practiced over the years, I witnessed many people give up their practice halfway, and some even fail miserably. Their failure was due to their lack of a solid foundation established through ngondro. So please place great importance on your ngondro practice and make sure you practice it long enough. We should know that the Dharma is so profound you can't master it easily with little effort. It can take up to 30 years to attain the highest academic degree in the secular world. 3 years of kindergarten, 1 year of preschool, 6 years of primary school, 6 years of secondary school, 4 to 5 years of undergraduate university education, 2 to 3 years of master's studies, and 4 to 6 years of doctoral studies. Then, after all these years of study, one might finally have the scholarly qualification. In comparison, the Dharma is much more profound, so it takes much longer to attain experiential understanding or to fully master its essence. Many lay practitioners and monastics believe that taking refuge is all one needs to be a Buddhist, and that there is nothing else to do or learn. That's not true. The Dharma is far more profound than worldly knowledge. If acquiring worldly knowledge, which is easier and simpler, requires so many years of study, it's no surprise that the profound Dharma would require even more years. Many Dharma students at Larangar hold a master's or doctorate degree. When they first arrived, they showed me their degree certificates, saying, "This is my master's certificate," or "This is my doctoral certificate." Later, when they began to study Buddhist logic or the middle way, they became so lost and could hardly understand anything. Realizing they understand little about the Dharma, they dare not show off their certificates anymore. Therefore, you shouldn't think the Dharma is easy. It is because the Dharma is so profound that people cannot help but admire and appreciate the untainted wisdom of the Buddha. Nagarjuna says in the praise of Prajnaparamita, "Your body is faultless, only being seen by faultless persons. You are beyond cognizing and free of conceptualization. To you, Prajnaparamita, I pray with veneration." That is, the faultless Prajnaparamita, the mother of all the Buddhas, can only be perceived by faultless beings such as bodhisattvas. Indeed, the ultimate state of non-self and emptiness in Buddhism is beyond the reach of ordinary people who are deluded by greed, anger, and ignorance. The ultimate state can be taken up only by those who have tamed the worldly mind, become immune to rambling thoughts, eradicated obscurations in the mind, and attained supreme wisdom. Presently, there are more and more academic researchers who are immersing themselves in the study of the Dharma, including the doctrine of emptiness. This is good, but one should know that a true study of the Dharma also requires actual practice and realization. Otherwise, it will be very difficult for a person to antidote afflictions by merely engaging in theoretical and academic research without applying the Dharma in practice. Therefore, whoever a person is, they must attach importance to the texts of practical guidance, such as the words of my perfect teacher. Recently, a diligent practitioner who used to study at Larungar told me, "For more than a decade, I've never parted from the texts of the words of my perfect teacher, the way of the Bodhisattva, and the Guhya Garbha Tantra." Indeed, upon closer inspection, her books did appear well-worn. It is true that if a person has received the blessing and benefit from the teachings in the text, they are unwilling to part with it, and the benefit they get is beyond words. Especially in regard to Padmasambhava's teachings, it is crucial for us to cultivate faith. By doing so, we will be greatly blessed. Westerners are also greatly intrigued by the teachings of Padmasambhava, and many of them show great faith when hearing the name of Padmasambhava. The start of this is mainly attributed to the fact that the Tibetan Book of the Dead, Bardo Thodol, was translated and introduced to the West in the 1920s, which became renowned. Subsequently, Sogil Rinpoche's The Tibetan Book of Living and Dying, and other books or texts based on Padmasambhava's teachings enable many people to benefit from the tantric teachings. But unfortunately, some lay practitioners and monastics have not yet experienced the supreme blessings of Padmasambhava. As for me, I have been reciting the Padmasambhava mantra and praying to him since my childhood. At any time when I had a nightmare or encountered danger when herding yaks, I only prayed to Padmasambhava. To this day, I have never stopped praying to Padmasambhava. In the current degenerate age, when negative forces and obstacles are rampant, praying to other Buddhas and Bodhisattvas can be of help. But due to Padmasambhava's special aspiration and blessings in connection with the degenerate age, praying to him can put an end to the turbulent waves of difficulties and hardships. When the great master Shantarakshita first came to Tibet, his Dharma activities encountered all kinds of obstacles imposed by humans and non-humans. He appeared to rely solely on the power of Padmasambhava to overcome all the obstacles. In the future, when the opportunity arises, I would very much like to teach Mipam Rinpoche's White Lotus, an explanation of the 7-line prayer to Guru Padmasambhava. This commentary comprises the generation and perfection stages, as well as the great perfection. When the great Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche visited Namdroling Monastery in India in 1990, he taught the text at the request of the Sangha. The great Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche also gave us the teaching during the pilgrimage to Mount Wu Tai. This text is quite extensive. In another year or two, when causes and conditions ripen, I would like to teach this text so you will understand the great importance of the 7-line prayer. If Buddhists across the world pray to Padmasambhava, this will definitely dispel obstacles and difficulties for Dharma propagation, as well as for personal practice, and thus the Dharma will live long in the world. Buddhism is increasingly facing challenges from various directions, non-Buddhists intentionally bringing up challenges to Buddhism, and followers of other spiritual traditions encroaching upon the space of Buddhism. According to reports in Western media, Christianity may become the predominant religion in China in the near future. There are many such forecasts. Although these are just predictions, they may be supported by solid reasoning. The population of Christians in China is surging, adding a few million to a dozen million believers each year. In comparison, the population of Buddhists isn't growing at the same pace. Most Buddhists only focus on their own practice and rarely consider propagating the Dharma. For example, they don't think, how will the Dharma survive and thrive? How will the Dharma be passed on from generation to generation? Some eminent masters are planning the future of the Dharma, but the number of such masters is limited. Many Buddhists are just busy collecting alms to build solemn temples in remote places. Such initiatives are worthy of applause, but more importantly, we should think about how to spread the Dharma widely throughout the world. Therefore, whenever we meet someone in our daily life, if possible, we should pass on the supreme teachings of Buddhism and eventually help them accept it. We should not only understand the Dharma ourselves, but also try our best to help people around us accept the wish-fulfilling jewel of the Dharma and truly experience the incredible and sublime teachings of the Buddha. I think this is the responsibility of each disciple of the Three Jewels. Now let's continue the teaching on the difficulty of finding the freedoms and advantages. Venerable Longchenpa, in his wish-fulfilling treasury, specifies 8 intrusive circumstances and 8 incompatible propensities. Unlike the earlier 18 freedoms and advantages, which are generally recognized in sutras and shastras, these 16 additional conditions don't appear often in Buddhist texts. Nevertheless, they come from Longchenpa's wisdom and compassion. It is equally vital that a person who aspires to truly practice the Dharma does not get swayed by these 16 additional conditions. It is important for us to reflect on our freedoms and advantages. For example, after knowing the 18 freedoms and advantages, we should examine carefully to see whether we have them all and whether we are controlled by unfavorable conditions. If we are so controlled, we lose freedoms and advantages. Khenpo Ngagwang Pelzang used the following simile in a guide to the words of my perfect teacher. The 18 freedoms and advantages can be compared to 18 sheep and the intrusive circumstances to a wolf that suddenly appears and kills 1 or 2 of the sheep, with only 17 or 16 sheep left. If the wolf kills all the sheep, we will have no sheep left. Similarly, even if we have all the 18 freedoms and advantages now, when unfavorable conditions arise, we will lose certain freedoms and advantages. Therefore, we must check whether we have all 18 freedoms and advantages. If we are missing one of them, it may be all right on the surface, but if the missing one is very important, it can negate all the other freedoms and advantages. For example, if we don't enter the Dharma, even if all the other factors are present, we won't have the opportunity to practice. Without understanding this, even if you consider yourself a great practitioner and believe that you have descended from the Pure Land or Lotus realm, which may fill you with overweening pride, You are at most a Buddhist by name. Therefore, when studying and practicing the Dharma, it is of utmost importance to follow the sequence instead of dreaming yourself reaching the summit in one single step. The 16 additional conditions are described in the wish-fulfilling treasury as the following: turmoil from the 5 emotions, stupidity, being dominated by evil influences, laziness, being inundated by the effect of past evil actions, enslavement to others, seeking protection from dangers, and hypocritical practice. These are the 8 intrusive circumstances that leave no freedom. Being bound by one's ties, flagrant depravity, lack of dissatisfaction with samsara, complete absence of faith, taking pleasure in bad actions, lack of interest in the Dharma, heedlessness of the vows and of the samayas. These are the 8 incompatible propensities that leave no freedom. Now we are going to study each of the 16 additional conditions one by one. Make sure you understand the definition and the corresponding remedy for each condition. 8 intrusive circumstances that leave no freedom to practice the Dharma. An intrusive circumstance refers to an unfavorable condition a practitioner encounters temporarily, occasionally, or frequently in the course of their practice. As Khenpo Ngawang Pelzang said, even if you are not affected by any of these intrusive circumstances today, or in one particular session, or at the start of the session, they may appear tomorrow, in the following session, or at the end of the session. In a word, an intrusive circumstance may arise at any time and anywhere. It leaves you no freedom to practice the Dharma, so it is alarming. Many people, including those presently sitting in the Dharma hall, want to be good practitioners. You may even consider yourselves competent enough to deal with any affliction. It's good that you are self-confident, but one day, when an unfavorable circumstance arises, it is hard to say whether you will still stay with the Sangha. After all, the circumstance may not be as easy to handle as you initially thought. Therefore, we must all examine ourselves very carefully and apply the appropriate remedy to dispel each unfavorable circumstance. It is like when we have a wish-fulfilling jewel. We need to always keep an eye on it so it won't be stolen. In the same way, now that we have a precious human life, we should understand the following teaching and apply the remedy for intrusive circumstances, so we won't be affected by them and be deprived of the opportunity to practice the Dharma. Past practitioners were fully aware of what the favorable and unfavorable circumstances are. They always guarded their body, speech, and mind with mindfulness and vigilance. As a result, whatever unfavorable condition arose during their practice, they wouldn't become constrained, and their practice always started well and ended well. We should do the same, being able to discern unfavorable circumstances and remain vigilant at all times. Venerable Longchenpa's wisdom is very profound. He gave very clear and detailed instructions here. Any practitioner who cares about their own practice will care about the issues brought up here. Later, when such a practitioner encounters an unfavorable situation, they can recognize it right away and apply the remedy to dispel it. The remedy for each of the 8 intrusive circumstances is also covered in a guide to the words of my perfect teacher, which you should take some time to read as well. Now let's explain each of the 8 intrusive circumstances in greater detail. 1. Turmoil from the 5 emotions. People who have extremely strong negative emotions, such as hatred for enemies, infatuation with friends and relatives, and so forth, may occasionally wish to practice the true Dharma. However, these 5 poisons tend to have a strong grip on their minds, making it difficult for them to accomplish the Dharma properly. Those people with strong negative emotions find it hard to practice the Dharma, even if they intend to be practitioners. For example, if someone has anger issues, when they have an outburst of anger, no one can calm them down, and they smash whatever is around them, including pots, bowls, teacups, or even windows. Another example is a person who has infatuation with family and friends or greed for wealth, and they will lose their sense of shame whenever infatuation or desire arises in them. As Gyaltse Tokme Zangpo, 1295-1369, says, "Our attachment to family and friends overwhelms us like a torrent, while our aversion towards enemies rages inside us like a blazing fire." At this moment, neither the teacher can dissuade him from being angry or greedy, nor can the Dharma be of help. The consequence is disastrous. This also applies to the rest of the 5 negative emotions. Of course, when they are in a better mood, they want to practice well. However, their 5 poisons are so strong that the occasional idea of practicing the Dharma disappears as quickly as lightning at night. Most of the time, these people are dominated by afflictions and don't have the freedom to practice the Dharma. A certain staff member at La Rungar who follows my teachings is like this. At the beginning, I had high expectations of him. When he was in a good mood and had few mental afflictions, he promised to volunteer for certain Dharma activities. His promise sounded so good that I believed him, saying, "All right, go ahead." However, after a while, he started to lose control over emotional turbulence. Of course, it is fine if this happens only once, because anyone can make a mistake. But in his case, it was a recurrence. He was angry one day and became greedy the next day. Well, if he cannot even deal with his own intense negative emotions, how can he be of help in the Dharma activities? Nevertheless, such an individual is wretched. After all, he is constrained by circumstances due to his karma from previous lives, or perhaps his failure to antidote afflictions in this life. In any case, his turmoil of negative emotions stops him from having a successful practice. In comparison, some other staff members may lack efficiency and competency, but they don't have strong negative emotions. Even as they get upset, they won't throw temper tantrums. People with anger issues often blow up or explode at others, which can even scare the Maras away, not to mention humans. Therefore, if a person is overwhelmed by strong negative emotions, it becomes not only challenging for them to practice, but also for them to benefit other beings. The remedy. The antidote to infatuation or greed is to meditate on impurity, or as said in the Garjana's precious garland, to contemplate impermanence and no-self. The antidote to anger is loving kindness, or examining oneself with the instructions in the chapter entitled Patience, in the way of the Bodhisattva. The antidote to ignorance is to meditate on dependent arising. In general, when these negative emotions first arise, we should antidote them with mindfulness and vigilance in time. We should uproot them immediately, so they won't destroy the roots of merit in ourselves and in others, as said in the 37 practices of all the Bodhisattvas. The practice of all the Bodhisattvas is to slay attachment and the rest, mind's afflictions, at once, the very moment they arise, taking as weapons the remedies held with mindfulness and vigilance. For once the kleshas have become familiar, they will be harder to avert. However strong a person's afflictions are, as long as they can apply the remedy with the blessing of the Dharma, they can change completely. For example, someone used to be dominated by greed and live a notorious life, but later they gained a deeper understanding of the supreme Dharma and realized their past deeds were very bad. From that moment on, they made a sincere effort to change for the better and embarked on the right path. Some people used to have strong hatred, so they always carried machetes with them and got into fights every day, much like how Geshe Ben Kungyal behaved before his ordination. Later, these people entered the Dharma and started to practice love and compassion. In the end, even if they were to be cut by others with a knife, they wouldn't become angry for a split second. Of course, people have different karmic affinities with the Dharma. Some people may have studied the Dharma for a long time but have not had any experience. Others may align with the practice in no time, just like severely ill patients getting cured right after a treatment. They can eradicate afflictions swiftly with the help of the Dharma, and their change is visible to everyone. Therefore, as long as you are motivated in your mind to antidote afflictions, you can dispel them. Why is that? It is because the remedy is in accordance with the reality of the mind. 2. Unintelligence. Even if an unintelligent person takes the lay people's precepts or becomes a monastic, they can't understand the teaching or apply the teaching to their practice. That is, they cannot understand when listening to teachings, don't grasp the meaning when contemplating, and don't develop realization of the natural state when meditating. Such an unintelligent person and the Dharma always part company, so they lack the capacity to really hear, contemplate, and meditate, and they cannot taste the true flavor of the Dharma. Such a person lacks the intelligence to recall, let alone understand, even the very basic Buddhist teachings, such as the difficulty of finding the freedoms and advantages, not to mention the profound teachings on the middle way or the great perfection. The person has a human form but doesn't have the capacity to practice the Dharma, so it is very hard for them to build a supreme affinity with the Dharma in this life. Of course, there are very few exceptions. For example, Suddhipantaka was initially unable to understand the Buddha's teachings and almost completely forgot everything the Buddha said. But later, due to supreme causes and conditions as well as his faith, he attained enlightenment. Such a thing could happen. Remedy. The remedy for unintelligence is to begin with confession. Someone complains that he is too unintelligent to remember anything. For example, he tried for a long time to memorize a text but couldn't remember a single word during the exam. Such an inability is due to heavy negative actions and obscurations from the past. Therefore, confession is a much-needed remedy here. Moreover, the remedy also includes praying to Manjushri, the Bodhisattva of wisdom, who embodies the wisdom of all the Buddhas. Each of the 8 great Bodhisattvas has a special aspiration and blessing power, and Manjushri is the one who helps beings develop wisdom. Therefore, we should sincerely pray to Manjushri and recite the name and mantra of Manjushri. By doing so, we will never part from the luminosity of wisdom, life after life. For this reason, the great Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche asked those who took refuge with him to recite at least 100 million times the mantra of Manjushri. Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche reassured his followers, having recited the mantra, those wise individuals will have more and more wisdom in this lifetime, and those lacking wisdom will be born as wise individuals in their future lives. In fact, dim-witted individuals are in greater need of pursuing wisdom. If they don't diligently hear and contemplate in this life, they may always remain unintelligent life after life. Someone said, "I am not smart enough. It doesn't make any difference if I listen to teachings or not. Therefore, I just choose not to listen." However, Sakya Pandita said, because of their lack of wisdom, those dim-witted individuals are reluctant to go after teachings. If they examine why they lack wisdom, those dim-witted individuals should pursue the teachings even more. According to Sakya Pandita, it is just because a person is too unintelligent that they should diligently study the Dharma even more. People's views are upside down. They think they lack wisdom, so they are not willing to study the Dharma. In fact, it is because they lack wisdom that they should listen to Dharma teachings even more. It's just like this. A rich man is not in a hurry to make money, whereas a poor man needs to make money quickly. A dim-witted person is unintelligent in this life because he didn't study the Dharma in previous lives. To avoid being unintelligent again in future lives, such a person should diligently study the Dharma, regardless of any difficulty. Sakya Pandita said, "It is because one pursued no Dharma in the previous life that one became a fool in this life. To avoid becoming a fool in the future, one should study the Dharma diligently, regardless of difficulties. Therefore, I hope you will make the most of this current opportunity to study the Dharma and establish a positive cause and condition for future lives. Otherwise, if you miss the opportunity, it will be too late to regret it." 3. Being dominated by evil influences. Some evil teachers who can appear as monastics or tirthikas hold wrong views and, for example, reject rebirth and karma. People taken by such teachers as disciples will depart from the Buddha's teachings and deviate from the right path to liberation. There are many charlatans these days, or false spiritual teachers, who mislead many Buddhists. Eventually, these Buddhists are also filled with perverted views and lose faith in the Dharma. Nevertheless, they often think they excel at views and practice. In fact, they are nowhere close to understanding the doctrine of Buddhism. Sadly, they can hardly be dissuaded from choosing the wrong path. Remedy. The remedy for being dominated by evil influences, that is, being taken as a disciple by a charlatan. Start with examining whether the teacher has all the good qualities, or in other words, whether the teacher is a charlatan or a qualified teacher. If the person is a qualified teacher, you should happily follow the teacher with 3 ways to please the teacher. If the person is an evil teacher, you shouldn't approach him at the beginning. This is very important. When examining a teacher, do not consider external signs, such as miraculous abilities or clairvoyance. Instead, you should examine whether the teacher has bodhicitta. If so, you can follow the teacher. If not, however supreme and profound the teaching given by the teacher is, you shouldn't approach the teacher. Regarding this examination criteria, many masters, including Khenpo Ngwang Pelzong, held the same opinion. Patrul Rinpoche says in the Golden Key to Pith Instructions, many individuals who lack the pith of bodhicitta self claim to be tantric practitioners in this degenerate age. Even if their self-boasting is spreading across the vast sky, their teachings are nevertheless demonic, despite the praise from others. As the verse says, during the degenerate age, many people don't have bodhicitta, yet they claim to be tantric practitioners. Some even say they've attained enlightenment. Even if such a person's self-boasting is diffusing across the vast sky, and others also greatly praise him, without bodhicitta, his teaching is no different from the demonic Dharma. Of course, it is difficult for people without telepathy to fully discern whether the teacher has bodhicitta or not. So, we have to infer the teacher's bodhicitta from his deeds. If what the teacher does is only for himself or his own lineage, this is not necessarily a good thing, so we need to continue the examination and remain cautious. If what the teacher does is always for the benefit of beings, then you may follow them. Thus, the only way to discern a charlatan teacher from a qualified one is to see whether the teacher has bodhicitta or not. 4. Laziness. Those who want to study and practice the Dharma but are too lazy will never succeed in the pursuit of Dharma because they are so trapped in their own indolence and procrastination. It says in a book that Westerners and Easterners have different kinds of laziness. For Easterners, being lazy means basking in the sun or always lying down, whereas for Westerners, it means being busy all day long. However, it seems that laziness in the East and the West is quite similar now. Urban dwellers' laziness is always being busy, whereas rural dwellers' laziness is always being idle. Neither of them pursues the Dharma. It's understandable if a worldly person is lazy. If a practitioner is lazy, it will indeed bring negative impacts to his liberation. Remedy. To counteract laziness, you must reflect on death and impermanence. When you meditate on impermanence, you will realize not much time is left. so how dare you still idle here and there? When you see others talking about trivial things, you will think, why bother chit-chatting? The Dharma practice is more important. Life is so short, so what's the point of wasting time? Therefore, those who have practiced well on impermanence manage their time very well. In contrast, those who have not practiced well don't manage their time well, which is reflected in what they say and do. 5. Being inundated by the effect of past evil actions. For those who are heavily burdened by negative karma, the vast ocean of their previous wrongdoings churns with great turmoil. Despite their diligent practice of the Dharma, they can hardly develop any of the right qualities in their minds. Unaware that this outcome is the consequence of their own negative actions, they instead lose confidence in the teacher and the true Dharma. Remedy: perseverance is a must for studying the Dharma. When a Sangha was in retreat at Kukatapada mountain, after 6, 9, and 12 years, he achieved nothing, not even the sign of a good dream. Thoroughly discouraged, a Sangha left the retreat cave. Along the way towards a nearby town, a Sangha finally met Bodhisattva Maitreya. Due to a Sangha's act of great compassion to a dog, a form Maitreya had taken, it took a sublime being like a Sangha 12 years to actually see Maitreya, never mind us ordinary people with heavy karmic debts. When obstacles come up during our practice, getting sick, encountering difficulties, and more, you shouldn't conclude that your practice will be a failure or start to resent the 3 jewels. Instead, you should think, all thanks to the supreme blessing of the Dharma, my next life's negative karmic consequence got ripened in this life. The Diamond Sutra says, it is because of their previous evil karma, which would cause them to be reborn in the wretched destinies. But now by enduring the disparagement of others, this previous bad karma is eradicated, and they will eventually attain unsurpassed complete enlightenment. Therefore, when encountering great obstacles or difficulties in the course of our practice, please don't resent the happening or externalize it to others. Instead, we should think of the obstacles as helping us eradicate negative karma. Please have conviction in the law of karma and repent for our past negative actions. Only by doing so can we eventually recognize the nature of the mind. Some people have practiced the Dharma for a long time, yet failed to attain any state of realization due to their heavy negative karma. Seeing no progress in their practice, they left the Sangha and cut off their connection with the Dharma. Alas, make sure you don't follow this bad example. 6. Enslavement to others. Some people are in a wretched situation. They are not allowed to study the Dharma or even simply set up a shrine table at home under the control of their parents, children, other family members, or even superiors. Tibetans, on the other hand, are greatly supported by the whole family if they decide to pursue the Dharma. In fact, others will laugh at and criticize the Tibetan family if they don't support a family member's spiritual pursuit. So even if the family doesn't want to support the person, for the sake of their reputation, they have to. Remedy: the solution for people who are controlled by others and have lost their autonomy is to try to find a right way to bring freedom back. A master of Han Chinese Buddhism once said, "If you want to study the Dharma, there is always a way." Indeed, as long as you want to, you may study the Dharma secretly in various ways, or as a last resort, you may leave the unsupportive environment. If parents put pressure on you every day, at a certain point, you may tell them, "Thanks for being my parents. I will only pay back your kindness in my next life." Pursuing the Dharma is not being ungrateful to you. I will dedicate my merit to you. When some monastics have no other way out, they may say something similar to their families and dedicate merit silently to them. It says in many Buddhist texts that if nothing else works out, a person may leave the family and live a free life as a Dharma practitioner. 7. Seeking protection from dangers. Some people embrace the Dharma out of fear related to their current life, concerns about food, clothing, and other hardships. However, since they lack deep conviction in the Dharma, they can easily revert to their old habits and resume non-Dharma activities. Some individuals encounter obstacles and difficulties in life and temporarily generate renunciation, so they choose to become monks or nuns. However, because they don't have a developed, in-depth understanding of the Dharma, when obstacles arise, such as meeting their former lovers, they immediately break or abandon their monastic vows and return to their prior lifestyle as householders. This shows that the Dharma hasn't infiltrated their minds. It is very important to integrate the Dharma into one's mind. Unless you've experienced the true flavor of the Dharma, no matter how many seemingly good deeds you've engaged in, at a certain point when an obstacle arises, you won't be able to face it. Remedy. You should correct your motivation for seeking protection from dangers by cultivating and generating renunciation and bodhicitta through various means. 8. Hypocritical practice. Some practitioners are imposters who, through pretending to follow the Dharma, attempt to gain material possessions, services, and prestige. While they may appear to be practitioners in front of others, their true intentions are focused solely on this life, thus distancing themselves far from the path of liberation. Remedy. The remedy for hypocritical practice is to recognize the faults of your worldly pursuits in this life and give them up. These are the 8 circumstances Longchenpa has listed that render it impossible to continue practicing the Dharma.